multiple phases. Joining us now to discuss, former ambassador to the United Nations and former national security advisor to President Trump, John Bolton. Ambassador Bolton has a paperback version of his memoir, The Room Where It Happened, out now, with a new foreword on how detrimental a second Trump term would be. Ambassador, let's start with Iran. You have said that you think Biden should order strikes on targets directly in Iran, and you say we're already in the wider war so many have warned about. Which targets inside Iran?
Well, let me be clear. The reason to go after targets inside Iran is that they've made it very clear they consider that a red line. Well, I consider killing Americans a red line, and they have crossed it. So to establish clearly that we're prepared to do what's necessary to prevent Iran from succeeding through its terrorist surrogates in the region, I think we've got to let them know that we don't care any more about their red lines than they care about ours. Now, I'm not talking about, at least at first, going after regime-threatening targets. I'm talking about things like air defense systems inside Iran, military bases in the west of the country where Shia militia groups have been trained and armed over the years, Iranian naval vessels in the Red Sea. We'll see what their reaction is to that, and then we can decide whether to go after oil infrastructure, the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, or regime command and control facilities. For Biden not to make it clear that the United States knows who is pulling the strings in all these conflicts in the Middle East simply risks having this conflict continue.
But wouldn't this just escalate the conflict?
I think right now Iran is not paying any price for anything that's happening in the region. And until they begin to pay a price, they will simply continue to push. No one wants a wider war, but look at the way Iran is behaving now. Do you want to try and confront this problem now, or would you rather wait until Iran gets deliverable nuclear weapons?
So Ambassador Nikki Haley, a fellow former UN ambassador and the last major Republican candidate still standing against Trump, laid out in more detail than Trump how she would respond. Take a listen.
Put the sanctions back on. First thing. Second thing is go and look at the production sites where those missiles are coming from. Take those out in Iraq and Syria. Thirdly, go after the IRGC members that are making these decisions. It's strategic. It's not that you just go bomb a country. You go and you take out one or two of those leaders, it will leave them flat-footed.
Now, Biden did announce extra sanctions today on Iran's military and on Hezbollah's financial network. Do you agree with Haley's other 2 points?
Well, look, the Biden administration for 3 years has not enforced the existing sanctions, and it has allowed Iranian oil shipments and revenues from that to get back almost to the levels they were before the sanctions were reimposed in the Trump administration. I think there are a lot of things you can do that are not regime threatening. And being a moderate guy myself, that's what I'm recommending for the first attacks inside Iran, so that everybody will know that we don't have the hidden agenda that I have to change the regime. But the point is that the Biden administration is bending over backwards at this point not to hit targets in Iran, and that will have exactly the opposite effect of what they want. It will embolden Iran because it says we're afraid of their red line.
So just to elaborate on what you just said, I mean, you're suggesting regime change. How does one go about doing that while staying within the boundaries of international law?
Well, I think it's very easy. I think the people of Iran are overwhelmingly against the regime. I think there are any number of things we could do short of using military force to aid the people of Iran. The only thing that keeps the Ayatollahs in power now is the barrel of the gun. And I think Iran's heading for a period of real instability when the supreme leader dies, because I think that's when the regime can fragment. You're not going to have peace and security in the Middle East as long as the mullahs in Tehran are arming and equipping the Houthi in Yemen, Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and these Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria. Iran is the central threat to peace and security, and we're not doing anything about it.
Let's turn to the new foreword of your book. You predict that if Donald Trump wins in November, quote, he will not depart voluntarily this time. Elaborate on that, if you would. Do you think the political violence that we saw on January 6th is inevitable if Trump wins another term, that he will decisively refuse to leave at the end of 4 years because he's unable to change the Constitution to his liking?
Well, it's more in the context, what if he is convicted in one of these criminal cases? Probably if he's president, he will have dismissed the federal cases. But what if he's convicted in Georgia, let's say, and the Georgia State Police arrived to come and put him in jail? I think Trump's going to do everything he can to maintain himself in power. He does have the Constitution standing in his way this time, which expressly bars a third term. And I'm sure one of the things he'll do is launch an effort to amend the Constitution. But it's also the chaos that he'll spread really from day one by trying to use the Justice Department to get retribution against his enemies. And who knows what he'll try and get the Defense Department to do.
You told CNN's Caitlin Collins last night that there's no correct answer when choosing between President Biden and former President Trump, and that you're not going to vote for either one of them. But really, it ends up being a choice between two individuals, two candidates. I know you wrote in somebody last time and that you vote in Maryland, which is a reliably blue state. But what do you suggest national security-minded voters in battleground states do?
Well, I haven't given up on defeating Trump for the Republican nomination. And until the convention nominates him, I don't plan to give up on that. People say that, you're in a box, you're afraid to vote for a Democrat. I'm not going to vote for somebody whose philosophy I disagree with. That would contradict my most fundamental beliefs. I'm in a situation that is very unhappy. I think Trump is feckless and incompetent to be president, and I think the policies being pursued by the Biden administration right now are very damaging to the country. There is no satisfactory candidate. That's not because I'm afraid to vote for Biden. I'm not going to vote for a philosophy I've opposed since I first supported Barry Goldwater for president in 1964.
Suffice it to say, you would be delighted to vote for Nikki Haley?
I would vote for, I would vote for. I would have voted for any Republican other than Donald Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy in this past go-round.
Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much.
Glad to be with you.
As Congress fights over a potential border deal, cities across the U.S. are reaching a breaking point and begging for more help to deal with the surge in migrants. Why this crisis could now lead to essential services such as firefighters